workshop, and that has the official title, Conclusions and Recommendations. So I'm not going to give a short summary. No, I'm not going to. But what we did as an organizing committee, we during the course try to extract the main lessons learned from this workshop, and also the message that we hope we have conveyed to you when you start compiling the are compiling the financial accounts and balance sheets. And this is the first sheet that, well, I think it relates to having fun if you want to compile. I think this picture perfectly shows, well, not everybody's looking happy, but it shows the fun we also had in this workshop. And more importantly, that we created some kind of group of equals, which now, well, also can exchange experiences and even help each other further. And of course, we had wonderful lunches, we had wonderful dinner, we had an excellent guided tour. So I hope that also, well, sticks in your mind when thinking back on this workshop. On the more, you want me to click? I can click. On a more serious note, I think the takeaways from this workshop, if you start from the top, and the top is of course what the users want. I think one of the takeaways is, well, explore and prioritize the need of users, both national and international. Perhaps nationals at the start are a bit more important than the international ones, and also engage with partners and communicate on the needs, resources, and expectations. That's, I think, one of the first stages which everybody should do when they start with financial accounts and balance sheets. The second, and that was also one of the sessions, it was clearly stated that, well, if you want to compile statistics, you need to have data. So start taking stock of data, of information, data sources which are available. And while you're at it, also assess the quality of the data sources and assess whether or not they're useful for the account. But also be aware that not all sources have to be perfect from the start. If you only start with perfect sources, or if you only want perfect sources, I wouldn't even compile Dutch financial accounts. Every source has its flaws and drawbacks. But so not all sources have to be perfect from the start, and realize you can improve them from the process and during the process. Because once you confronted sources with each other, you will also see that, okay, source A says this, source B says that, there's an inconsistency which we can solve, and that can perhaps be done by changing source A or source B, or perhaps somewhere in the middle. And while you're at taking stock of the information, also, well, try to rank the data sources in quality. So identify the strong or stronger data sources and the one to be used as supplementary data. And that order can, of course, change. It can depend on, depend on time. Sources might become better, but it can also vary according between instruments or between subsectors. So be aware of that. And one which was really mentioned is that, well, if you have the data, well, reuse data. So reuse data sources as much as possible. I think one of you gave us the phrase collect once, use by all, and that's really one to my heart. It's well, we all work for public service, so we have to be really careful with the money we spend from taxpayers. So if we can collect it once, that's the best way forward, and please try to make the use at as maximum as possible so everybody can use the data within limits, of course. The final one on this sheet is the international standards. They, of course, have many recommendations to compile financial accounts and balance sheets, including classifications. But I think we also learned in this workshop that for and most important is to look at your own economy. What are the sectors which really matter in my economy? What are the transactions which really are important in my economy? And start working on those first. Not only do you then a good job for your users because they want information on that part of the economy, but also you make life for yourself much easier because that's where you can make really great and fast steps. And for that, yeah, I put it between quotes, adjust official classifications to national circumstances. I'm not advising you to ignore the SNA or the BPM and the classifications, which are, of course, in those manuals, but look at what you can do with subsectoring. So if in the non-financial corporation sector, you think, well, I cannot cover the entire sector, but I know for a few parts, I know what data I have, I know how it functions, I know they are important for the economy, just make them in the classification and start with those. What's the first sheet? Then the second, I start with the data you have, improve and expand gradually. So step by step by baby step has been mentioned these 3 days. But I think that's a very important lesson. And once you get started, don't be disencouraged by discrepancies. Look at them as opportunities. Sounds very simple. Sometimes it's not simple, but always see that discrepancies are part of the game. Don't hide them, and well, also don't hide things you cannot explain, and don't change data to hide discrepancies, because then you get yourself even in more trouble. So for the short run, you can tolerate some discrepancies. In the long run, you should analyze them and resolve them as much as possible. And 0 is not necessarily an end goal. Yeah, perhaps you can skip the necessarily, not necessarily. It's not an end goal. Try to set thresholds for the discrepancies so you can tolerate and which your users accept. And there are some examples available. Well, we put here the example which was mentioned by John on the first day on the Eurostat ECB task force. I think over the past few days, Tihomira, we gave a lot of hints to documentation available. So one of the follow-ups will be that we sent you a list with links which have been mentioned during this workshop. But to go back to the discrepancies, they're part of the game, and well, try to be as sensible as possible with dealing with discrepancies and trying to solve them. Then revisions, and that's also one of the questions we had in the panel. They are part of life and not a bad thing. They're not a bad thing if you have a policy and if you have communicated a revision policy for your users and to your users, and preferably that you align the revision policy with other parts of the accounts, but for and foremost, be transparent with the revisions and explain the changes to users and be prepared for questions they might have. So if you revise your data, it's always good to, well, ask yourself the question, what if I would be on the user side, what would my first question be on the data they have changed? So why did you change the data? What new information do you have to change the data, etc.? Those are the questions you can prepare for yourself, because you're certain that your users will ask those questions to you. So to the more organizational part, and that really came out nicely in this workshop also from you, and there were perfect examples in different countries, that having joint work groups can and will facilitate the improvement of the process. And there it's important to be open, ask the right questions, and always cooperate with a positive mindset. And in that way, you can gradually improve sources, the accounts, etc., etc. But that's an important way to follow. It's also important to decide on the distribution of responsibilities, also taking into account national circumstances. So that could be by sector or by financial instrument or any other combination. The legal framework is, of course, important, including a memorandum of understanding. Not to advise to start with one, but along the way, you really have to think about that, because it helps you to support the institutional arrangements, but also, well, can solve issues which may arise, for example, with data sharing among institutions. And if those issues arise, it's really helpful to have a legal document, a legal framework, in which you can say to anybody who asks, well, we have an agreement and it's based in the legal laws we have, and this is the way we work, and this is how it's being done in our country. So the third one on the sheet is the GSBPM. I had them write out what it was. I always forget, but it's the generic statistical business process model, which is a worldwide accepted framework for statistical processes, which divides a statistical process in logical and small steps, and that can really help you to provide a framework to structure your process and to help to think about how do I want to design my process. Communication with other compilers, producers, of course, are very important, but also with our users. And I think we have been mentioned over and over again, and that's a very important part of the work we do at Statistical Office and central banks. Always, well, we do not produce the figures for ourselves, but for our users. And finally, we put the bullet, ask for help and help others. That could be peers, that could be this group. Well, you have been working together for 3 days now with each other. I've seen lively conversations and interaction in the groups, and I truly hope that cooperation in this group will also continue once we have left this room at say half an hour. And well, you can also help each other in that respect, but also help from the international organizations is of course available. And with that, I think I've come to the end of this conclusion session. But of course, your ideas are also welcome on the follow-up of this workshop, so your views and ideas. And there will also be a short evaluation survey, and there will be a link in the chat, and a mail will be sent. But I just saw you already sent the mail. Great. So this is a call to please fill in the questionnaire, the survey, and but also a call for if you now have any ideas, okay, what could be a follow-up of this workshop, also please take the floor. Yes. Yeah.
But I have a question or a follow-up. I'm sorry, really, but the first time we have published in May, we published the financial accounts in Armenia, but how to push policymakers to use it? I mean, shall we write guidelines or make analysis of the financial accounts so that the policymakers can use it? So this is a question, actually. What shall be done with our statisticians so that the policymakers use the financial account?
Yeah, I understand your question. Let me try to answer. I think one of the first things we do as statistician is we like to make figures and put the figures on our website or any other form. But I think and I firmly believe that we also always have to look, okay, how are we going to look for policy applications of the work we do? And we of course start with making the data, and that's perfectly okay. But the step towards, well, guiding your policymakers and other users into what can you do with the accounts is really important, and a step certainly to be taken. So I would like you to encourage to certainly do that. And in that way, you really help your policymakers. Does that answer your question? No? No further questions, suggestions? Of course, suggestions and questions are more than welcomed by mail. So we have the survey, but I think if you add extra lines for suggestions, they are more welcomed by, also very much welcomed by the organization. One, yeah. Sorry, yeah. My mistake.
No, it's not problem. We would like to thank you for the organization of such a wonderful seminar. Within the framework of week, we managed to build up that wonderful communication and interaction, and my wish for the future to organize such seminars, such meetings more often, when they will be more practical and very interesting meetings, and to have two goals for the both groups of countries. The groups that do not compile financial accounts maybe should already start compiling them little by little, and then with time you'll be able to assess whether we're successful. And the another group of countries that are putting forward that are already compiling their financial accounts, they can go on and they can build their balances of payment and building their systems of national accounts. So let all our data be useful. We thank you for such a wonderful and warm atmosphere. And thank you very much for such a wonderful seminar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind words and suggestions. No, I think then it's my task to close this workshop unless I'm looking at this side. No. Then, and I'm also going to thank all of you, because I think we as organizers can organize a workshop, but the workshop is only a success if you as participants, well, really feel it's value added for you and actively participate. So really like to compliment all of you for the very interactive sessions we had. Also in the group discussions, I saw a lot of, well, interaction and lively discussions. So thanks for that. Also, thanks for the fun we had over the past 3 days. And of course, also thanks to the technical support here and the translation. I'm always impressed with the amount of work you do behind the screens just to make this kind of, well, workshops running smoothly. So thanks a lot for that. And also thanks to the translation. Well, I can imagine it might be quite difficult for translation to sometimes follow what we are saying, which is very specialized. But hearing from the translation, I think they did a very good job. So I'm always impressed about that.